Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend in the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Yeah, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo coats haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend in the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Yeah, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo coats haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.
Ladies and gentlemen. Oh, hell no. Nope, I'm done with this. Oh, that was unnecessarily loud. You could have just asked me to leave.
Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live from my studio/RV dining room, located directly inside America. Anyhow, welcome back, folks, to the interwebs. Once again, your host of Operation GCD, JJ Vance here, and perhaps more notably, not the vice president. Anyhow, welcome back, folks, to the interwebs. I will be your pilot navigator here for tonight's shenanigan-infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. And, 8mm, huh? Good choice. Got that on deck this week for an occult and or esoteric review of the film 8mm, coming up here on Wednesday. Operation GCD Live tomorrow night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Times. But, folks of the interwebs, thanks again for joining me here tonight to get a little GCD. And I'm not going to lie to you, folks. Got a real barn burner here on deck for y'all tonight. The conspiracies surrounding the Society of the Cincinnati. In fact, before I get to those matters, a couple administrative points here before that discussion this evening. So, like I said, got 8mm on deck for an occult and or esoteric review. Apparently, the Operation GCD Muppet Department is currently on strike. Union rules, apparently. Those damn commie bastards. Anyhow, that's coming up Wednesday, tomorrow night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Times. And then, of course, Thursdays, we got the ongoing adventures of Muppet Mikey Aquino and his pals in the Anatomy of the Satanic Panic. So that's on deck as 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Times as well, this Thursdays. And then Fridays, got a real barn burner on deck for you folks. It's an ex-Mormon general conference, if you will. Myself, Hottie Love, and Jacob J, the host of Rise to Liberty. That dude keeps trying to out JJ me, and I'm simply not going to have it, folks. Won't have it. So, yes, appreciate that. Yep, Operation GCD anthem, if you will, there. It's the, I didn't play the music. I did, however. I will take credit for those lyrics, though. So, anyhow, 8mm is super dark. I actually hadn't seen it until very recently, and I just watched it again, and not a fan. But anyhow, before we go any further here, we're doing the Operation GCD Live here, Sundays on Tuesday. And that is, in fact, the matters at hand this evening. We'll be doing the remainder of the show over on patreon.com/Operation GCD. Those folks who are Operation GCD subscribers, appreciate the support. Come on over, join the conversation, and the rest of the show over there. We're doing an introduction here this evening. And as I often argue, all roads in conspiracy culture here in America lead back to that secret society that started America, the Society of the Cincinnati. So, and these things keep playing out over time. I mean, I don't try to, toot my own horn, so to speak here, folks, but, the society just pops up time and time again. This week, Joseph Bartholomew, descendant, General Joseph Bartholomew. Many of his descendants, became Mormons. Not the only ones. We've gone over a number of those lines here, as the Mormons are an offshoot of the Society of Cincinnati. So, Gerald Hall, yes, sir. I'm way too fast for them lasers. They can shoot me 2 or 3 times. I'm still going to dodge them, sir. So, so I was, in these matters of Charlie Kirk, as I maybe addressed last in previous shows here, but Charlie Kirk, topic of much conspiracy culture. I argue all of that's stagecraft, what we've seen. A lot of feuding factions and different warfare among secret societies. But Charlie Kirk's forefather, 5th great-grandfather, a Lieutenant Joseph Kirk, the Virginia chapter of the Society of the Cincinnati. His wife, surnamed Frantzvi, I don't know how you pronounce that. She's actually born in Cincinnati, and I often argue that the city of Cincinnati remains the operational headquarters of the society still to this day. And on that note, her paternal grandfather, they're of Swedish origins, her paternal grandfather was knighted by the King of Sweden. a member of the Society of Cincinnati. So a lot of society stuff going on there. So when I find live footage of the entire event, strange, right? 2025, even 2025 folks in attendance for that Kirk event, Utah Valley University, should have hundreds of live videos. We have a few, largely Patterson Gimlin quality footage of some grainy images and whatnot. But the only man to get some actual clear footage that day, strangely enough, a descendant of Joseph Bartholomew. And you don't have to take my word for it, folks. You can listen to it himself. This man was doing an interview on Crowdsource the Truth with Jason Goodman. And here they are revisiting the Utah Valley University campus here just a day or two ago.
Of English descent, is my understanding. My mom's really big into the genealogy, so I'm sure I can get a more solid answer on that question. But there's a General George Bartholomew, I think. There's a Joseph Bartholomew we're traced back in Massachusetts.
So there you go, folks. Isn't that weird? I mean, or is it just normal that the only man to get actual live footage there, and again, he's Mormon, is in fact a descendant of Society of Cincinnati aspects of this Mormon branch off. As Joseph Smith, I've pointed out numerous times before on the subject, Joseph Smith's grandfather, a Captain Smith out of the Massachusetts chapter, his father was actually the man who helped coordinate the Boston Tea Party. And they actually incorporate the theology of the Society of Cincinnati into the Mormon philosophies, notably Solomon Spaulding, a lieutenant out of the New Hampshire chapter of the Society of Cincinnati, and a founding father by the name of Elias Boudinot. Not the Cherokee man by the name of Elias Boudinot. However, I'm strangely related to both Elias Boudinots. But Elias Boudinot, the founding father, who wrote a book called Stars in the West. It's basically the story in which Joseph Smith and gang provide the basis for their lost tribes. So the theology comes directly from the society. He's from a society family. The Mormon religion was started on a mound. There we go. A Star in the West, a humble attempt to discover the long lost tribes of Israel. So this was 1816. This was solid 14 years before Joseph Smith would allegedly put anything on paper regarding some sort of salamander, magical toad, or angel Moroni, however you want to take that tale. But nonetheless, the Society of Cincinnati's long been mired in conspiracies long before the Charlie Kirk incident. So, I often argue a lot of times, what's the, regarding our current epicenter of activity regarding these matters, I argue, well, when did a lot of these things start? A lot of these things start, I argue just the mere fact of the existence of the society starts from the Knights Templar, and that's notably seen through George Washington, where the U.S. Constitution of the Bill of Rights was provided first by their ancestors in the Magna Carta. So that is, in fact, the case. The most prime example is George Washington. 10 of his forefathers, 14th through 17th great-grandfather, 10 of those men were the 10 of the 25 Knights Templar that brought us Magna Carta. Modern-day historians call that the U.S. Constitution is Magna Carta 2.0. So, these matters, I think, are much older than we presume them to be on their face. And modern-day historians always argue these aspects of, these are very much a contemporary dispute and has nothing to do with older bloodline lineage. And I think in regards to that, oftentimes around these matters of the Society of Cincinnati, things are absolutely shit-coded. So, for example, George Washington was the president general of the society. He did not want to start it necessarily. We'll get into that a little bit tonight regarding this comparative analysis of a PhD paper out of the University of Munich. But it was, I argue that here on July 9th, 1799, a previously otherwise healthy George Washington completes his last will and testament and is then sick for the next 5 months there at Mount Vernon before he dies on December 14th, 1799. Now, his death is described in not so many details. In fact, the official Mount Vernon site will tell you he only started getting sick a couple of days prior, December 12th. Then there's other articles from the Constitution Center, like the mysterious death of George Washington. I agree it was mysterious. If you read his journals, he got ill there in July and completed his last will and testament. So I would argue he was murdered, and so was the second president general of the Society of the Cincinnati, in a Society of Cincinnati factional coup of what I call the anti-liberty movement and the liberty movement. That's the Burr and Hamilton duel. So before modern day historians currently recognize this as an incident where recognize Burr is going on as a treasonous act to try to take over America, along with other members of the Society of the Cincinnati and European interests. Well, they don't. What the modern day historians leave out is this is the first act in that treasonous coup by Burr and gang, and that is, in fact, the murder of the President General, Alexander Hamilton. This was done right after the accomplishment of the society in gaining a land claim from their previous ancestors, the Templars. The land claim known as the Kensington Runestone, which brought us the Louisiana Purchase, which is an exclusively Society of Cincinnati deal, including Napoleon. So there's a lot of matters of conspiracy around this group for many years. However, when I stumbled across this here paper from the University of Munich entitled, let's see here, The Deepest Piece of Cunning, Conspiracy Theory in the Society of the Cincinnati, 1783 to 1790. Now, I will give credit to this German fellow who wrote this. I don't speak German, and they did write a paper in English that, I got a lot of problems with this. They call it a PhD thesis. We'll get into some of these details, but the basis of which is, the title here is from John Adams, who by himself was a member of the Society of Cincinnati, not an original member, but an honorary member by virtue of being the United States president. But he was ardently opposed to the Society of the Cincinnati, and strangely enough, folks, he was also firmly within that anti-liberty faction. What I mean by that is Adams had lots of European interests, business interests, that is, that he maintained well after the war. And so same goes for many of these other folks that are actually quoted in this paper. It seems to be this PhD paper here seems kind of skewed, if you ask me, but we'll go over some of those details here tonight. One of his buddies that is cited in this paper as being an ardent opponent of the Society of the Cincinnati and this grand conspiracy. So this paper cites a grand conspiracy, right? It's the, again, entitled Conspiracy Theory in the Society of the Cincinnati. Now, this is all under the pretense that the conspiracy theory mentioned here is the subversion of liberty here in the Republic. Now, they don't mention the opposing factions, right? As I was saying, George Washington didn't even want to start the Society of Cincinnati. And I do believe, based upon all my studies, that he did take that position as the President General by vote of the members of his army that started this, that formed the officers that formed the original membership. However, he did so because he was faced with numerous coups previous to that. In fact, one of the individuals that we're going to be going over tonight out of this paper here that is indeed a associate of John Adams, and again is firmly within that same anti-liberty movement that I argue, because he, much like Adams, continued to have many business interests and therefore monetary interests in which to not, I repeat, not I'm not the vice president, but I repeat, these fellows were not an interest of America prosperity, right? They're serving the biddings of their European interests, if it's Aaron Burr, John Adams, or this fellow, another founding father who is very much opposed to the Society of the Cincinnati, as cited in this paper.
Elbridge Gerry, 1744 to 1814, delegate from Massachusetts, signer of the Declaration of Independence. Elbridge Gerry was born in Marblehead, Massachusetts, the third son of a merchant from England. He entered Harvard at age 14 and went on to become one of the wealthiest businessmen in Marblehead. In the early 1770s, Elbridge Gerry made his first ventures into politics, supporting Samuel Adams' radical resolutions to declare the colonies free and independent. He was elected a representative in the colonial legislature and took his seat in the Second Continental Congress, where he voted for independence on July 2nd and signed the Declaration on September 3rd, 1776. The following year, Gary also signed the Articles of Confederation, the first framework of national government, one of only 16 members of Congress to sign both. During his
You ain't kidding there, Huggy Bear. I salute you for using your brain hole for God's intended purposes and not for the, like most folks do, or many folks do, and that is an oversized paperweight. So you folks may have not heard of old Jerry there, or Gary as they're calling him, but you probably heard of what the results of his activities are. Gerrymandering, that whole political nonsense about moving district lines in which to achieve, unscrupulous ends. Those kind of same unscrupulous ends that George Washington warned us about in 1796 when he was opposed to political parties, much like he was opposed to the formation of the Society of Cincinnati, but understood that this was a matter that certainly threatened a young republic, and I do believe that was his solution, because what's not often described about old George there is he had a extensive spy network. In fact, one of those spy networks was revolving around this one, the Conway Cabal, which that Jerry fellow was part of. So now go figure. Another individual that was part of this whole little coup against Washington during the war was Benjamin Rush, another signer of the U.S. Constitution, not a Society of Cincinnati member. Again, you can start seeing some of these lines. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have some good points. I don't necessarily think that this hereditary knighthood of a military junta style is a positive aspect for America. But what's the opposition? They're opposing forces. The reason it exists is for they're faced with opposing forces, like Benjamin Rush here. Now, when I argue that these matters still concern us and these ongoing conspiracies, not just from 1783 to 1790, as cited in that paper, we see Benjamin Rush's descendant, I would argue, a very commie bastard. He was that fella who attempted to go see the Titanic a few years back. If you recall, he had a tin can, some DEI hires, and apparently a video game controller, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Stockton Rush. He's actually the descendant of Benjamin Rush, two different founding fathers, but he's the paternal descendant of Stockton Rush. Or, sorry, disregard Benjamin Rush. The other founding father he's descended from is Stockton. So, anyhow, this fella, Stockton Rush, made a whole bunch of commie DEI kind of comments publicly, was very vocal about his commie policies and running his business operations. Anyhow, I argue that's something he got from his daddy. Who's his daddy? What did he do? Well, if you go back far enough, his daddy attempted a coup against George Washington in that Conway Cabal, and that Jerry fellow was involved in it. So I think these are important things to note when considering the statements made in this PhD paper out of Munich. Again, I can't speak German. So the fact that the guy can speak German and English apparently is salute to him, but he's way off on a lot of his conclusions. He doesn't take for a PhD paper, takes no consideration to the source of the information. What I mean by that is not only does he not take the commie conspirators there of the Rush family and Jerry, if you will, there, he also doesn't take into consideration the statements when citing the statements of this fella, Agnes Burke, who wrote a paper in October 1783, so right after the formation of the Society of Cincinnati in May, called the Considerations on the Society of Cincinnati. Pretty much, very much critical of, again, a lot of this, and we'll go over some of those points I cited in that paper here tonight. However, one thing not cited in that paper is that Adonis Burke was indeed a member of the South Carolina chapter of the Society of the Cincinnati. Controlled opposition much? I think so. So this is what I mean by when you're not taking into consideration all these factors, all the known knowns and the ins and outs and what have yous, well, you're going to come to some inaccurate conclusions. And I do believe that's what we'll be looking at here tonight, some inaccurate conclusions. And of course, again, these matters of conspiracy continue to thrive around not just to this modern day with that Kirk scenarios and whatnot. But again, I argue there's not an American conspiracy culture here in America. There's not a conspiracy that I cannot connect to the Society of Cincinnati. So once again, it proves correct here relative to the Kirk situation. But once again, when looking at who's providing this information, again, we have the only live streamer from that event. Not only is he a Mormon, but he's also, apparently a descendant of Society of Cincinnati member, General Bartholomew. Yes, our history is absolutely a lie, for sure. So, and understanding all these conspiratorial aspects of that Burr Hamilton conspiracy, I've been covering a lot of that with my fellow associate there, my dude Brad Minyard, who's a descendant of Joseph Minyard / Joseph Menier. Joseph Menier being his pseudonym. We've been tracking him. Brad's largely been tracking him, bringing him to my attention. But this was a man recruited by George Washington's chief recruiter for his spy network, a Captain Joseph Menard. I'm sorry, disregard Captain William Rickard. Get my names mixed up. And in that series here on Operation GCD, Chasing Menier, we've been tracking that Burr Hamilton conspiracy because that's what Brad's ancestor was doing. He actually interacted with Abner Vance, my ancestor, who was a spy and a scout for Washington in Rowan County, North Carolina in 1781. Oh, weird. George Washington also visited them there. That's strange. Anyhow, these matters often don't get described regarding these conspiracies. It wasn't just everyone was on board to start America. And even those that were on board, there was, I would argue, some factional disputes therein. For example, we see a guy who was actually essentially the general of Washington's spy apparatus, William Dewar, and he was attacked very much within his own lifetime. He was actually imprisoned under, I would argue, some false pretenses regarding debtor's prison. So, there's a lot more to unpack around these matters, and it is not just a simple we won the war and that was it and everyone was on board for it. Hoorah! That's not how it all went down at all. But it is how our history often describes us in these lies. But I did see a comment here about Eldridge Colby, and I don't want to mix that. Where did I go with that? Is this? I'm lost. I don't know what's going on here, folks. I'm new. I don't know what to do. Oh, there we go. Eldridge Colby. I don't know. The Colby boys are suspect. But Eldridge Colby is likely the next descendant in the Colby line in the Society of Cincinnati out of the Massachusetts chapter. His father's about, last I looked, about 80 years old, living. That would be Bill Colby's eldest son. This would be Bill Colby's eldest son's eldest son. He's in the Pentagon today. Yeah. It's again, it's not a shocker to me to track the bloodlines of these folks and see them all doing something. Again, we see Stockton Rush. Again, name a person. If you know a French name, it's probably connected to the French chapter, not just the current Pope, the Prevosts. Or Rodney Alcala's paternal heritage. That dating game serial killer, the Buquois. They're also out of the French chapter out of New Orleans. His paternal grandfather, a mayor of San Antonio, and that man's who was his daddy. What did he do? Well, he was one of the first Texas Rangers, preeminent law enforcement organization in Texas. Well, that means grandson murdered a lot of folks. So it's always interesting to me to track where these folks go. And another prominent name would obviously be the DuPonts. They're also in the mix. And the E.I. DuPont would be the original member. He would try to help King Louis and Marie Antoinette escape when shit went downhill over there. So again, there's conspiracies abound across the map. Oh, our channel's here in the mix. Great to see my favorite CIA AI bot, Bill Colby, ball washer. What do we got, sir? The continent of America founded by Columbus is different from the Masonic USA. Well, sir, I think you're misguiding a lot of things, but that's kind of status quo, I think, right? RR. So, Masonic Nation, I doubt it. That's oftentimes the propaganda around these matters. There is, in fact, no proof behind these things. Shocker. So, shocker, you would subscribe to that history, RR. Shocker. But I mean, it's typical. So, not every president was a member of a Masonic lodge, but every president was a member of the Society of the Cincinnati. That's a fact. So, not only that, we see matters again. When I look at the conspiratorial matters, it's not just America or France there when shit went loose and a lot of the society guys over in France got their heads chopped off between 1792 and 1794. That's when the DuPonts and everyone else jumped ship. So all the French members were banned from France from 1794 to 1925. That's why we see them take a stronghold here in America. Another member of this French chapter was recently the head of major liquor distributor and manufacturer in America, the Jack Daniels folks. So these people all hold major positions. It's not just from the top down as far as the leadership of the organization goes, right? Again, another hereditary line would be the McCains. John McCain, the former U.S. Senator, John McCain number 3. John McCain, his daddy. And who was his daddy? What did he do? Well, his daddy and his daddy were both the only 4-star, 4-star equivalent admirals in the U.S. Navy history. Father and son. Only father and son history. So I would say that's a pretty important situation. Then you got the current members, probably John McCain number 4, his son. So Lord knows what that guy's up to. But when you're looking at things in Arizona, it's probably somewhere in the mix. And when I say Arizona, that's where a lot of that Charlie Kirk stuff's really popping off at. Yeah, I'd say that's my biggest complaint, folks, as we're looking at this paper here tonight. We'll be thank you all again for joining me here. Get a little GCD on these matters of these Cincinnati schemers. I heard that in a song somewhere. So, and again, it's what's often, I think, in any analysis that I've read outside of, and I'll give this man credit in 1 second, any analysis that I've read fails to address the obvious bloodline hereditary membership of a hereditary bloodline organization. So whether that's on purpose in some regards, like Adolphus Burke, or if it's like old gerrymandering Jerry there, I think those guys both make similar points, but one is a controlled opposition and one is actually opposed to the Society of Cincinnati. Jerry, that is, versus its member, Burke. And I don't think it's that far off. And speaking of your misquoted history there, RR, the anti-Masonic party in America was actually led by Society of Cincinnati folks. Two of the major, at least two, if not three, of the major figures in that leadership of that party, the first third-party politic in America, was the society. So all I'm saying is all roads in conspiracy culture here in America lead back to the Society of Cincinnati. But the one person that does make some legitimate points in regards to the bloodline aspects and try to understand their impact today when conspiracy culture is indeed that domestic Nazi terrorist Fritz Springmeier. Yeah. So in his Bloodlines of the Illuminati, I believe it's his 1996 edition. He writes, he does address the Society of Cincinnati, and again, I'll address that one in the future. We're not going to go over an analysis of it. Well, we might look a little bit of that tonight here, folks. But Victor E. Shoof, the likely Colby Queer, West Point attendee, recommended by Senator Bob Dole, son of a CIA guy, would bring us these items about the bloodlines of the Illuminati. Now, again, I disagree with some of his conclusions overall in that book. And the bloodlines that he states is the ones that are the Illuminati, but he does address the Society of Cincinnati, and he does make some legitimate points in there. For being a Nazi domestic terrorist, I have to agree with even a Nazi domestic terrorist clock is right twice a day. These clocks, they, regardless if you're Nazi Satanist or Nazi domestic terrorist, even their clocks are right twice a day.
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
Even Ted Gunderson, old laser tag Ted's clocks are correct twice a day. And watch out, folks. Stay vigilant. They got Ted twice. You gotta keep an eye on your 6 there. But anyhow, he does. Old Victor E. Shoof, the Nazi domestic terrorist, convicted. He connected to that Aryan Nations compound. Colby's Queers. There you go, RR. RR, our local supporter of domestic terrorism and Operation Gladio style activities. He's a big fan of Bill Colby. Anyhow, we see there in Bloodlines of the Illuminati that he does cite some accurate information. He cites the bullshit of the Bouvier family tree. That is Jack Black Bouvier, the father of Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis. And he was, in fact, a hereditary member through his mother and her mother, because if you don't have a son in this organization, it goes down through the maternal bloodlines. It does happen upon occasion. It's tougher to track sometimes, but as a result of that, it seems JFK Jr. was born into it because his grandfather had no sons, had no other grandson, and passed away, I believe it was in 1957. So JFK Jr. would have been born into the Maryland chapter. However, there was a powerful admiral out of the French chapter by the name of Bouvier, and I believe the shit coating around that is in fact due to the fact that the Bouviers are descendant from that man. So, but nonetheless, Springmeyer comes to the proper conclusion based upon evidence he had available in 96, apparently, which is kind of impressive, especially for a domestic Nazi terrorist. So anyhow, we'll be going over those matters. And one other matter of note that I think is often ignored here when we're considering the matters of the bloodlines and the conspiracies, right? And that's what this paper is about. Granted, I don't want to go in 1783 to 1790, so they missed the 1810 Swedish coup involving Society of Cincinnati members and, the lineage to the current king. They like to say he's a hereditary. They like to say he's an honorary member. I call bullshit. You look at the hereditary aspects of the original membership and this coup that goes on over there in 1810, which then would later spawn the current, they call themselves British, but they're really Bavarian. The Windsors are connected to these matters. So I think you start taking a deeper look at these feuds that connect through the society on both sides of the pond, the Atlantic here. Well, paints a very different picture, but it provides a more cogent sight picture regarding our modern day politics of these matters. Because how is it that the opposition, let's say the Windsors, again, example, was in opposition 200 plus years ago, and they're still seemingly in opposition today, right? It's kind of who America was the original Brexit, 1776, right? And some, it's not a clean lineage there, but with the Windsors, but we can see the ongoing feuds from these matters through the King Georges and whatnot, and et cetera, et cetera. And again, I don't think it's lost. I think it is lost on many folks that this is a much older dispute through these bloodlines and whatnot. And we see these things perpetrated and manifested through various groups in our modern era, be it that anti-liberty faction and their Pilgrim Society, started by Chauncey Depew, New York hereditary member of the New York chapter, U.S. Senator. He, in fact, was a major figure in starting the Pilgrim Society, which includes folks like Henry Kissinger, Cocaine Bob Evans' buddy, and King Charles, right? The Windsors. What do you got? William Colby not guilty of murdering 30,000 women and children. ACC to McGowan, it was 20,000. Dude, look, dude, we've gone over this, dude. Congress says it was 26,000 women and children. South Vietnamese government says it was 42. I'm going to split the difference, bud. I'm going to split the difference. Thank you, RR, for your timely efforts of being wrong. So anyway, we're going to look over these matters. And then one thing I want to consider also, and it's not considered again. And when anyone outside of touching on it a little bit, but didn't do a great job of it, Fritz Springmeyer, is the obvious older nature of these disputes, considering these are all bloodline descendant situations. So, and for example, I want to just emphasize the points on that within our modern era and how these things may affect it within the society. So you have this fella, Captain or Major Joseph Oswald. They list him here as a captain. I've seen paperwork saying he was a major, though, so that's interesting. Anyhow, out of the Georgia chapter of the Society of Cincinnati, right? He just happens to be the forefather to Lee Harvey Oswald. Paternal forefather, third great-grandfather. So it seems, based upon Lee Harvey Oswald's great-grandfather being a colonel in the Confederate Army, there's disputes about the paperwork regarding that. He's buried in the Confederate Army graveyard in Gulfport, Mississippi. So those disputes can, much like RR, those disputes can go fuck themselves. They don't use logic or reason. The guy's listed as colonel on his gravestone, and he's buried in a military graveyard. So we don't have to dispute these things too much, I don't believe. But nonetheless, that's Lee Harvey Oswald's grandfather and disregardedly great-grandfather. And we see here that Joseph Oswald's other descendant is, in fact, also Theodore. His second great-grandson is Theodore Roosevelt. Yep, third great-grandfather, Lee Harvey. Second great-grandfather, Teddy Roosevelt. So Let's just take, for example, when Lee Harvey's father was likely the hereditary member from Joseph Oswald in the Society of Cincinnati, and Teddy was a honorary member by virtue of being the U.S. president. Well, let's look at those details. Do you suspect that the third cousins, disregard second cousins Oswald, may have a beef with one another? Being Teddy may have a beef with his second cousin Oswald for he doesn't get to pass on membership in this organization to his son. But in fact, that's not the case with the Oswalds. So that's what I'm saying. Who has more power here? Another good example was, and it would be in 1978, 79, during the Iran-Contra affair, the October surprise business there in October of 79 regarding Jimmy Carter. Well, Jimmy Carter, his second great-grandfather was a Captain William, Lord of Mercy. I done lost his name for a second. Give me 1 second here, folks. Captain William Seal. Barry, I was about to call him Captain William Barry. Captain William Seal, out of the North Carolina chapter of the Society of Cincinnati, who's also his paternal descendant, is the infamous Barry Seal. You know, Lee Harvey Oswald's buddy from that Civil Air Patrol unit in 1954. They're in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and their leader was David Ferry, that creepy eyebrowed fucker. Not Michael Aquino, different kid diddling creepy eyebrow fucker. Anyhow, do you suspect that the Iran-Contra affair, when you have two different cousins Seal on opposing factions of this matter, has something more to do with bloodlines? I suspect it does, because Barry Seal's firmly within the opposing faction against Jimmy Carter. That is, he's on Team Bush. You know, he's a pilot for the Air America stuff. You know, Colby's Queers, waging terror across America over time here, RR. But I'm glad to see not only are you supporting their efforts of waging terror and murking women and children to the tens of thousands, you also support domestic terror. I salute you for your dedication to being wrong there, RR. But we do see that Barry Seal, firmly within that deep state, Colby's Queers, Iran-Contra, drug trafficking network. You know, American Made was a film recently by Tom Cruise. You know, he once again played a tall guy who knew how to fight. I'm not sure if Barry Seal was a tall guy who knew how to fight, but nonetheless, we see his cousin Seal is Jimmy Carter on the opposing side of that whole Iran-Contra situation. So seems like there may be more to that story, just saying. Anyhow, on that note, we'll be going over these matters here further this evening. Kind of a low bash Fritz. I followed him for about 2010. He's not a terrorist. Well, Nance Hardwick, I do apologize if you're offended by that. And when I say I apologize, I mean I apologize you didn't read this. Let me bring this back up for you in case you're unfamiliar. I bring up his court case for you. He bombed people, robbed a bank, shot at some folks. I call that domestic terror. Directly connected to the Aryan Nation's compound. Again, I call some mouths of season here, folks, stating the facts. So you're certainly welcome to support such a matter. I think it's ridiculous, but we see RR here supporting ridiculous stuff. So Fritz Art Springmeyer, Victor E. Schoof. Let me just bring you up his West Point assignment too while we're at it. Had that up here the other day. Boom. Let's see here. That ain't it. I'll find it in a second. Oh, here we go. Bob Dole. There we go. Oh, well, that's the I got an actual copy of that here. But yeah, here we go. Victor E. Schoof. Criminal conviction on January 31st, 2002. Springmeyer was indicted in the United States District Court in Portland, Oregon, in connection with an armed robbery. And if you look at the details of that, they blew up a building, robbed a bank, and shot at some folks. No one was apparently killed, thankfully for them and the people, the victims. On February 12, 2003, he was found guilty of 1 count of armed bank robbery and 1 count of aiding and abetting in the use of a semi-automatic rifle during the commission of a felony in violation of U.S. Code, blah, 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 blah. I believe he did 9 years. So I'm not going to support domestic terrorism. I'm also not going to support folks who are out there making shit up. So I've kind of gone over a lot of Fritz Springmeyer stuff regarding his bloodlines of the Illuminati. Touch base on it at least a little bit. Be going over more in my OpGCD Thursdays, the anatomy of the satanic panic, as he ties squarely into that whole operation. And why not? He's the son of a CIA guy who has a very unknown military record. I'll leave it at that for right now. So, and let me see if I got that here. Yep, here we go. Let me just bring that here appointment up. His West Point appointment. Mr. Now, you know, most West Point grads, they go on to do domestic terror, I'm sure, right? So here we go. This was April of 1973. Senator Bob Dole today announces that Victor E. Earl Shoup, again, son of a CIA guy, Mr. James Shoup, going to West Point. So anyhow, maybe you and RR should, no offense there, maybe you and RR should team up on these matters, because I'm not ever going to support domestic terrorism. I think it's ridiculous that anybody does. The indiscriminate assassinations and casualties of women and children is something I'm never going to sign up for. So, anyhow, let's see. What else we got here? I hope you aren't using the CIA version of the book on their website. They confiscated. No, come on now. Let's be honest about the situation. Let's the matters of Victor E. Shoup will have to remain for a different day. All right. I'll give you one more opportunity. What else? What barn burning comment you got for me here? I broke with Fritz when I became Catholic, but I'm pretty sure he was set up. Are you kidding? Have you read the court filings? I swear, dude. Again, I appreciate your dedication to be wrong, RR, but you're batting 1,000 here tonight as usual. So I don't support kid diddlers, indeed. So, and on that note, Mr. Victor E. Shoup had a long-term relationship with a convicted kid diddler known as John Todd, another one of these perpetrators in the controlled opposition of the satanic panic. Folks, we're in year 45 of this panic. So, well, that is a good point though. When I'm making these points about controlled oppositions, and that's what that's full of with those characters such as John Todd, is, you know, the Satanist Nazi fella. Any disputes of that, I'll be happy to bring up that evidence there. But his pal Randy Weaver, you know, of the whole Ruby Ridge situation, also connected to that Aryan Nations compound. Again, all these folks know each other. What are we missing out on here? Again, if you need some help on some of these notes, tune in to Operation GCD more often there, Nance. First time I've seen you. So on that note, folks of the interwebs, we do see the controlled opposition in tonight's conversation as well, because once again, one of the most cited folks in opposition in statements of and theories of opposition of the Society of Cincinnati is Adonis Burke. And we'll see that here in tonight's paper out of that Munich PhD paper, University of Munich. But again, Adonis Burke was indeed a member of the South Carolina chapter of the Society of Cincinnati. So on that note, folks of the interwebs, thank you all for joining me here tonight. Get a little GCD, including RR and his pal Nance there. All right, last one we got here. What do you got there, RR? Colby at one point described himself as a born-again Catholic, but I'm not sure what that was. Well, you, sir, at least admitted that you were confused for the first time. I appreciate your honesty on that matter. See a couple more chats here that aren't named RR before I go any further here, folks. Anyhow, the Society of Cincinnati, these conspiracies around and such don't just involve tonight's paper of 1790, disregard 1783 to 1790, but that is the focus of which. But as I've pointed out here, I'll continue to try to draw some correlations to our modern day aspects of these conspiracies relative to the statements made then. Brent Thompson, come on, people. JJ does his homework. Well, yes, sir. And I don't trust anyone else to take my word for it, but I will be happy to provide the sources, like the obvious convicted court documents. You want to tell me Victor E. Shoup was set up? Well, here's the deal. That's a tough sell. That's a real tough sell. Ooh, I like this. I like that conspiracy. Speaking of conspiracy theories, Uncle Ted, I like that one. RR is just my fake bot account. I'm here fake botting on the side. I like it though. So anyhow, and Lucy's with the same conspiracy. All right, folks. Anyhow, you're right. I conspire with them. Appreciate you're right. I couldn't pay somebody or orchestrate such a matter to be so ridiculous as our channel. But anyway, on that note, folks, the interwebs, please join us here on the other side here on patreon.com/Operation GCD for the remainder of tonight's program. And our channel, Nance, come on down. You want to learn some more stuff here about the things you're obviously incorrect about? Come on down. Happy to educate. I aim to educate and to entertain. And on that note, folks of the interwebs, tomorrow night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Times, an occult and/or esoteric review of the film 8mm. Operation GC Thursdays, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Times. The Anatomy of the Satanic Panic, starring Muppet Mikey Aquino and his other Nazi friends such as Victory Shoof. And Operation GCD Fridays, I got the XMO General Conference of Heidi Love, host of Unfiltered Rise, and Jacob J, host of Rise to Liberty. And I'm never going to let that dude out JJ me, despite his attempts at trying. So, anyhow, folks on the interwebs, see Patreon folks over there momentarily, and catch this broadcast in the future. Come on down. Operation GCD. Oh, disregard. Patreon.com/Operation GCD. And like I said, come on down our channel, and Nance, happy to assist you in being less wrong. And one final note of tonight's production.
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
Watch out, folks. They got Ted twice.
Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend in the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Yeah, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo coats haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend in the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.